Hey folks, this is Jesse Cope, back with another episode of the American Soul Podcast. Hope y'all are doing well, wherever y'all are, and whatever part of the day it is for y'all. As always, I appreciate y'all joining me, giving me a little bit of your time, and continuing to share the podcast with others. I hope that it helps, gives y'all a little bit of knowledge, helps our country just a little bit. Maybe, just maybe, we can turn this thing around, folks. God willing. All things are possible with God, right? So we're going to take one of our little walks. You can hear the sprinklers in the background running this morning for some reason. Dogs have already started out on the walk with me and abandoned me, which seems to be a running theme. I don't know if I'm just that uninteresting to them or if everything else is just that interesting. At any rate, we're going to try and tie up today. I wanted to go back because I felt like I did a poor job of it in general. And B, though, I felt like there were some loose ends that I really wanted to tie up from this Churchill biography. And so I'm going to go back and just kind of read just one page. It's the last page I intended to get to, and then we'll talk about a few things. Where did it go? Sorry, folks. History has credited the Nazis for the restoration of the Reich's military might, but some Englishmen had anticipated them. In the summer of 1932, Franz von Papen, the then chancellor, declared that the shackles of Versailles were intolerable. The Times, again the paper out of London, which the Germans believed was the voice of the government, weighed the chancellor's complaint, found it justifiable, and called for the timely redress of grievances. Once Hitler had been sworn in and his Strassenkampfer, I believe, something like that, his stormtroopers, began unsheathing their long knives, the British government took the remarkable position that the detailed reports from two of its most eminent ambassadors, describing conditions in the Third Reich, were based on misunderstandings, distortions, and unconfirmed rumors. Speaking in Newcastle, Lord Lothian said that the Germans have passed through a tribulation which we have never known. We should receive in no niggardly spirit the offers. They were, of course, demands made to the world by Herr Hitler. The Prime Minister agreed. According to one Wilhelm Strauss document, which came into British hands when Berlin fell in May 1945, MacDonald assured Germany's ambassador to Britain, Leopold von Hosch, that he knew there were no atrocities, no beatings, no desecrations of synagogues, that everything England's own envoys had reported was, in short, a lie. MacDonald explained that he understood very well the character of and the circumstances attending a revolution. According to the Times, Baldwin told Hosch that England was entirely willing to work closely with a Germany under the new order. I'm going to murder this German, folks. Die Nurrenung. That's the word for new order, which I pronounced horribly. I apologize. It is startling to read this Nazi phrase, so frightened with evil, quoted by a once so freighted with evil, quoted by a once and future prime minister in the columns of the Times. Doubtless Baldwin had not grasped its implications, but he should have, and he should have spoken out. His silence, his refusal to see, hear, and speak no evil of the Nazi chancellor was characteristic of the response among England's ruling classes. If they offended him, they told one another, he, Hitler, would become hostile, and his hostility would blind him to reason. Vernon Bartlett thought his countrymen altogether too smug about democracy. Although it suits us, he wrote, it may not suit other people. Even Bartlett could not defend the imprisonment of Jews who had committed no crime and of former Reichstag critics of National Socialism. But he wrote, the government now proposes to get rid of the concentration camp without much delay. Sir Thomas More, a respectable MP with a distinguished university career behind him, was another early admirer of Hitler. He joined the Anglo-Germany friendship and spent half his time in Germany, where he reported he had been unable to find. Yeah, I think that's about all I really wanted, folks. I'm going to stop there because I just wanted to tie this up. Well, no, I'm going to finish this. Sorry, I just saw something else. He had been unable to find the trace of the abuses Rumbold and Phipps, those are the ambassadors, described. After the Nazi chancellor had been in power 8 months, More wrote in the Sunday Dispatch, if I may judge from my personal knowledge of Herr Hitler, peace and justice are the key words of his policy. The next year he wrote, give Hitler a chance, calling the chancellor, now Führer, absolutely honest and sincere. So I kind of tried to pull this in yesterday or on the last podcast when we talked about this. You've got two groups in America today that really represent this relationship between England and Germany. You have many people that consider themselves conservative and Christian in America today who are allowing and aiding the left in gaining power the same way the English did with the Nazis. They make excuses for them. Well, they don't really mean that, right? It's the example that pops to mind right now, just because I saw something yesterday late in the day on this. There was an interview now with the male swimmer who's pretending to be a woman, and he wants to go into the Olympics as a woman, even though every cell in his body has XY chromosomes, and therefore he's got more lung capacity, longer wingspan, stronger muscles, etc., etc. He's a man. But we've done this. We've allowed this. We catered to feminism decades ago when the feminist leftists started to say, well, we want equality, but they didn't really want equality. What they wanted is to be the same. They wanted men and women treated exactly the same. They rejected the different roles that God had given us, right? And they wanted to be treated exactly the same. Well, where does that lead? Well, then it led to, well, men want to sleep with men and women want to sleep with women. And what did we say on the Christian conservative side? We said, well, live and let live. You know, everybody gets to do what they want to do. And that's fine, except that it doesn't stop there. This appeasement tactic never works because it's, okay, so you do what you want to in the bedroom, as long as you just keep it to yourself, you know. But it's not in the bedroom anymore, is it, folks? It's in third and fourth and even kindergarten classes across the nation now, promoting this deviancy, this immorality sexually to our little children. And you had to see this. It's kind of like Manchester said here about Baldwin. He didn't see it, but he should have, and he should have spoken out. All these things, and he says Baldwin's, his silence, his refusal to see, hear, and speak no evil of the Nazi chancellor was characteristic of the response among England's ruling classes. We have chosen to not speak out as conservatives and Christians against rejection of God from our public institutions, education high among them, against abortion, against LGBTQ movement, against illegal immigration, against socialism and communism, you know, filtering in, pushed in, against revisionist history, critical race theory. All of these evils that the left has pushed, we've sat there quietly. Oh, we might argue in private. We might talk to friends who think the same as we do, even family members, but we've predominantly, vastly been quiet. And so that's one side of the American population, folks, a large chunk of it. And then another pretty big chunk is the side of the German people, right? So you've got the left, citizens. I'm not talking about national leaders, citizens here who push this stuff. Well, the Germans had to help Hitler get into power, either by ignoring his atrocities, which we have ignored evidence for a long time in America of, you know, I talk about this often. Probably the easiest one, or at least, well, the easiest one's abortion, right? We ignore that evil constantly. There, we're murdering. We've murdered 60 million of our own citizens, and we just shut that out somehow as a national, like our national conscience. We just ignore it and turn it off because we don't want to talk about it. It's uncomfortable. God, it's just something just right on the tip of my tongue, the edge of my memory right now from yesterday, again talking about that. We don't want to have hard conversations. We don't. It's too painful. We would rather watch sports and be on our phones and play games, video games, games outside. We would rather do almost anything but talk about the real issues in our life, including, folks, for a large percentage of the country, based on the divorce rate and the percentage of unhappy marriages, work on our marriage, which is really what today was going to be about, and we'll get there in just a second. The last two things I just thought were fascinating were the comment here between McDonald, I believe. No, this was, yeah, McDonald and Hosh about England being entirely willing to work closely with Germany under the New World Order. And man, New Order. Do we not hear that today a lot? If you don't, type it in somewhere into Google or something and look it up. But folks, it sounds new and scary. It is scary, but it's not new. It's the same thing that's been around. This is why these similarities between the American left and Nazi Germany are so compelling, because even the vocabulary is often the same. The goals certainly are. And then the willingness to turn a blind eye, that comparison between those of us that consider ourselves Christian and conservative and Englishmen in the 1930s is also just striking. The English were so, and you get it, right? They'd just been through World War One. They had lost so many of their young men. They didn't want to deal with anything hard. But what excuse do we have in America, really? I mean, we've gone through, after the end of World War II, where all of this kind of picked up in America. Yeah, we've gone through Vietnam, Korea, rough economic times. You could make the argument a little bit rough in the late 70s, but we haven't really been through anything, folks, and that's kind of the problem. We've had it so good. God has blessed us so much that, as Lincoln said, we've rejected him like we don't need him, and now here we are, and we don't even want to talk about them. We have turned into such a soft, weak society that we can't even stomach talking about these issues, and that's kind of where the English were, but they at least had the excuse of a massive war and loss of, I don't even know how many of their own sons. We don't have that. Or I guess we do, in the sense that we've killed 60 million of our own through abortion, but Lord, we don't even want to talk about that. We won't even acknowledge that, hardly. Not in any serious, although we're starting to get a little bit of traction. You're starting to have some states stand up and say no. But good Lord, why did it take this long? And are we really waking up? Or are we just trying to do just enough so that we get back to what everybody said after COVID, which is normal? I just want to get back to normal? Well, normal's gone, folks. All right, so I spent more on that than I wanted to. So I'll just kind of run this down. We talk about marriage and priorities every so often, kind of off the cuff quite often, right? But I'm going to read a couple things. One, this is out of Matthew chapter 7, a tree and its fruit. Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will know them by their fruits. Grapes are not gathered from thorn bushes, nor figs from thistles, are they? So every good tree bears good fruit, and the bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot produce bad fruit, nor can a bad tree produce good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. So then, you will know them by their fruits. Reagan, I didn't pull this quote, but we've talked about it often on this podcast, said that the family was the cornerstone. The strength of a nation is the strength of their families. Well, the strength of a family is the strength of marriage. And again, all you've got to do is walk the halls of any school across the country almost to see how devastating broken families are. And you really throw in any kind of major dysfunction there. You know, even if the marriage is still whole, folks, if it's so dysfunctional that the kids can feel it and see it, and their kids are super attuned, folks. They know what's going on. One of the things that I noticed in the Marine Corps with young Marines, and I've seen at other times throughout my life, is we tend to treat young people as ignorant for far too long. They're not ignorant. Now, that's not to say they're going to make the best decisions. You know, you give a 17-year-old some kind of hot rod, a boy at least, and they're going to make some pretty bad decisions on the road. You give young people liquor and they make some pretty bad decisions, right? I get it. Lord, voting, we shouldn't be able to vote until we're 40. But what I'm saying is that we treat our young people as if they don't grasp things for far, far too long, and they do. That's why they're so messed up, so broken when the family breaks, or even when the family's still together, but the family is broken, right? When mom and dad aren't working together the right way, the kids know it. They feel it intuitively. And if you have kids, if you're around kids, or you work with them, or you know somebody that is, just watch. They pick up on stuff so well. And so Reagan, you know, you don't talk about the family, you've got to talk about marriage. And if the marriage isn't working, folks, the family's not going to work. And if the family's not working, we got rain coming in. If y'all can hear that in the background, I'm going to have to go up on the porch. If the marriage isn't working, the family's not working. If the family's not working, the country's not working. And none of this can work if we're not following God's outline for the marriage and family. Oh yeah, we got a kitty cat that's not impressed with the rain. Come up here and sit on the porch. So the last one, we got one little girl that's coming out too. The last one I'm going to leave you with is a quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson. He was one of our greatest poets from the 1800s, I guess middle to late 19th century. He said, "Your actions speak so loudly, I cannot hear what you're saying." Whatever we do, folks, that tells everybody, tells the world, whoever's paying attention, what our priorities are. It doesn't matter what we say. We can claim to be Christian all we want. We can claim to be a loving spouse, a loving parent. We can claim to be a hard worker. Whatever it is that you want, whatever noble characteristic that you want to be able to claim, we can claim that all we want, but our actions are going to push past that. They're going to show people no matter what we say. It's kind of like, you know, you're in the dark and then you turn a light on. The actions are the light. And right now, our country, you can just look around. We talk a good talk, but we're falling apart. And you see it. And it all comes back to God and family. You can't have a strong country without those two things. And you can't have a strong family without a strong marriage. And you can't have a strong marriage without God. So I'll leave you with this. Think about the way you spent time this week. Think about how many hours you spent doing each of those things. I'm not even going to mention anything. Just go back and look at the way that you spent this week. and see and how you acted, what your attitude was during those times. Whatever it was, the way that you acted and your attitude and how you spent your time, and see if it matches up with what you claim. Even if it's only in your head where you claim it, right? We keep a lot of this stuff. We'll say humbly in public things, but in private, we really think we're pretty good. See if your actions match up. See if you didn't say anything to anybody else and they just saw the way that you lived your life, what would they say your priorities are? If they match up, great, folks. Um, I'm going to tell you, I'm having some real, what we used to call in the Marine Corps, come to Jesus moments with myself about my own actions, because we're in a lot of trouble. And if we don't really change some things, it's already going to get worse before it gets better, but man, it could get so much worse. So just think about that. Try and do a bit of honest reflection. Sure to appreciate y'all joining me, as always. God bless y'all. God bless your families. God bless America. I'm going to sit here and watch the rain come down from the porch with one puppy dog on the porch. We'll talk to y'all again real soon. Looking forward to it.